After many, many years of silence, Silent Hill has returned with the announcement of 4 new games, a remake and 3 original titles, to be released in the coming years. The details were sparse and only 2 of the projects had full cinematic trailers, but what was revealed was intriguing enough to have me excited and optimistic about the coming games. But more than any of the projects we've seen, I am ecstatic about Silent Hill F, the strange and haunting title written by the creator of Higurashi and Umineko, with designs by the artist of NG and Deathmark, and it looks like a fascinating, terrifying new direction for the series. It struck me powerfully because of what it might mean for Silent Hill. Of course, it is a game set in Japan, and many were immediately thrown by the change. What is a Silent Hill game that's not set in Silent Hill? This is not a new concern. As far back as 2003, the 3rd Silent Hill game first stepped out of the foggy town, and fans and journalists were concerned about the change. It was Owaku Hiroyuki, the programmer of the first 3 games and scenario writer for 2 and 3, who best explained why Silent Hill could exist outside the titular town. Silent Hill is not a place, it is a metaphor. Whether this new Silent Hill game will explain how this Japanese locale connects to the central town, or leave it unexplained and vague, remains to be seen. But what clues we have about the direction of the game stands out as powerful hints towards what could be the darkest and most upsetting game yet. I fell down the rabbit hole researching the game after following trails inspired by the tweets of Aesthetic Gamer and CG Melendez over on Twitter, discussing the symbols that appear in the game. Aesthetic Gamer discussed how this is a toy store, and the doll seen in the trailer relates to childhood, and ghost stories related to the deaths of young children, and this may be a major theme of the game. The scarecrow in the opening scene also seems to be wearing a child's uniform, just as the girl in the trailer is. CJ Melendez shared some information about the primary symbol of the game, the flower, which is a red lily or the higanbana in Japanese, a flower that represents death and the afterlife for the Japanese people. Others on YouTube have commented on my video to share that the F used in the title is in fact a musical notation, forte, referring to a strong, loud portion of a musical piece, and in the trailer the song reaches its forte at the moment the red flowers bloom. All this was fascinating, and led me to read more on these various subjects and piece together a vague image of what I think we might be facing in the coming years with Silent Hill F. The higanbana is a red flower that does not bloom naturally in Japan. It's natural to China, Nepal, Korea, and other areas of the mainland, and was introduced to Japan some centuries ago. It only grows where people plant it, and it has become heavily associated with places it's been planted: graveyards, Shinto and Buddhist shrines, rice fields, and riverbeds. The flower is incredibly poisonous, and so it was used to deter animals from disturbing dead bodies or damaging crops, and so it was primarily seen around graves. The red color in folklore was said to be from the flowers sucking up the blood of the dead. These flowers bloom for only a short time in mid-September, around the equinox, a time when the Japanese traditionally visit family graves. These associations with grave sites and poison have caused the flower to have an incredibly negative image. It has over 1,000 names: hellflower, corpse flower, red spider lily, and of course, higanbana. The term higan comes from Buddhism and refers to the far shore of the river Sanzu. In Buddhist tradition, after death, the soul must wade through a large river. Those with few burdens upon their soul find it an easy walk through gentle waters. Those who carry karma are dragged further downstream into more treacherous waters. The peaceful other side, the afterlife, is the higan, and the flower is associated with that place. It has better connotations in Buddhist tradition, and is also associated with a holy flower mentioned in the Lotus Sutra. The white variation of the red spider lily is said to be a flower that blooms in the Buddha's pure lands, called Manju Shage. referring to the soft white flowers of the Buddha's world. Let's take a moment to examine how this relates to the trailer and to Silent Hill. The opening of the game reveals a scene that looks relatively normal. A young girl standing before a broken statue and a small patch of flowers. The implications of these flowers, the red lilies planted at grave sites, reveals that this is likely a grave, and the statue is associated with Buddhism, possibly a specific Buddhist god named Jizo, the deity who watches over dead children and guides them to a peaceful afterlife. This may be a child's grave, and that death may be the catalyst for the events of the game. The Lotus Sutra, the sutra associated with the death lilies in Buddhism, has appeared in Silent Hill before. It is heavily referenced throughout Silent Hill 3, where multiple monsters have the sutra's name written upon them, and the themes of the sutra, the Pure Land, rebirth in paradise, escape from suffering, are major themes of the game. Late in the trailer, we see another scene with important visual imagery, a large body of water and a torii gate floating in the midst of it. These are Shinto symbols. The torii is a structure that indicates entry to the other side, the world of yokai and spirits, and they mark the entrances to Shinto shrines and holy places in Japan. Here, upon a body of water, it relates to the entrance to the afterlife, as water is heavily associated with the passage into death. Buddhism sees entering the afterlife as the passage of a river, after all. The bodies floating in the water before the gate seem trapped outside the afterlife, unable to pass beneath the torii to the other side. The plants have overtaken the world of this game. The further the trailer goes, the more we see plant life overtaking the buildings, the items, and the people in this world. It is an infection, a poison that is spreading ceaselessly. A tweet from a Konami account clarifies that these events are not only set in Japan, but in a historical Japan in the 1960s. A time of political and social upheaval, of incredibly violent, dangerous events, and a time not long after the tragedies of World War II. And it was with this tweet that clicked and made a final connection in my mind to what the flowers and their spreading might mean, what the metaphor might be related to. This is what came to my mind. Along this road, too, I could see wood sorrel and vetch dropping under the weight of new shoots that had sprouted too quickly for them to support. I had never heard anyone say that a sudden shock from light or sound or heat could set plants growing unusually fast. The bomb seemed to have encouraged the growth of plants and flies. At the same time, it put a stop to human life. Yesterday, I had seen a new shoot 1.5 feet long on the plantain tree. The original stem had been snapped off by the blast and had disappeared without a trace. But a new shoot, encased in a sheath of bamboo, was already growing in its place. Today, the shoot was a good 2 feet long. Over everything, up through the wreckage of the city, in gutters along the riverbanks, tangled along tiles and tin roofing, climbing on charred tree trunks, was a blanket of fresh, vivid, lush, optimistic green. The verdancy rose even from the foundations of ruined houses. Weeds already hid the ashes, and wildflowers were in bloom among the city's bones. The bomb had not only left the underground organs of plants intact, it had stimulated them. Everywhere were bluets and Spanish bayonets, goosefoot, morning glories and daylilies, the hairy-fruited bean, purslane and clotbur and sesame and panic grass and feverfew. This is what struck me powerfully once I knew the game's time. The bombing of Hiroshima and the tragic aftermath which saw so many people dead, and even those who survived found themselves radically altered, poisoned by a disease the world had never seen and barely understood. Years and decades after the tragedy, people still suffered its effects, and the aftermath of World War II and the nuclear bombs had devastating, terrible consequences for the Japanese people and the culture of the nation. Suddenly, here is a Silent Hill that may be diving into a new kind of trauma, cultural, generational, societal suffering on a scale that is hard to fathom. Now I understood, perhaps, the meaning behind the terrible skin sloughing off the girl's face at the end of the video. I remembered this portion of Black Rain, a fictionalized account of the real events of the bombings. The skin of his back had come clean away from his shoulders and was hanging limply like a piece of wet newspaper. The skin on the back of his hands had peeled off and was hanging in the same way. And another in Hiroshima, a documentation of the lives of people who survived. Mr. Tanimoto found about 20 men and women on the sand spit. He drove the boat onto the bank and urged them to get aboard. They did not move, and he realized they were too weak to lift themselves. He reached down and took a woman by the hands, but her skin slipped off in huge glove-like pieces. The bombs so damaged people's cellular structures that their bodies were transformed and falling apart. Yet plant life increased dramatically, so overwhelming the ruins that had been left behind that it was noticeable and memorable to those who suffered the tragedy years later. In Silent Hill F, we are presented with a world in which the town we see is overwhelmed by a transformative poison that benefits plants and kills people, that transforms their bodies and sloughs off their flesh, and leaves bodies of water full of corpses, just as the rivers of Hiroshima were that terrible day. Could this game relate to the tragedy of a child lost to radiation after the war, the sorrows of a country trying to recover from tragedy after tragedy, of a town that is overcome by poisonous plants and a ruinous curse, which in many ways symbolizes the same suffering people had been going through since the bombs dropped? The flower as a possible source of the tragedy relates to the original Silent Hill, and the white Claudia flower that was said to be related to the town's strange powers, the drug trade, and the cult's dark practices. And the red lily has a fascinating connection to Japan and the United States, and the dark history of the two nations, one which was struck by the bombs after years of aggression and militarism, another which dropped the bombs, ending a war and killing more than 100,000 civilians. The red lily was introduced to the United States from Japan, and it was introduced when those black ships came into the Japanese ports, and the U.S. forced the nation to open its borders to the world. Those same ships took home the poisonous red lily, and those events were the domino that would fall and lead so many decades later to World War II and the tragedies that followed. The bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in early and mid-August. Japan surrendered on September 2nd. And the higanbana blooms in mid-September.